Circuit 42 would like to thank Pop Culture Paradise, Toy Anxiety, the Spawn Point Gamers Lounge, and Dragon's Lair San Antonio.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Pass the Popcorn. My name is Ian McIntosh, and I am here with special guest Nathan Thomas Milliner. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
And just now, we've brought you on the show before to talk about your artwork, and while you have directed horror before, you've got a really high-profile project coming up with the Confession of Fred Krueger. And that's premiering this Monday, right?
No, it's premiering at Horror Hound Weekend in September. You're thinking of the Monday after Horror Hound is going to go online on YouTube.
Ah, okay. And what's the exact date that it's going to be premiered at Horror Hound for people who are going to be attending?
Horror Hound Weekend is December 11th to the 13th. It's going to play on Friday and Saturday, the 11th and 12th, 10 p.m. And it's going to go live on YouTube on Monday, September 15th.
Awesome. The kind of unintentional thing that we tend to do here at our show, we'll schedule two guests who are kind of related to each other. And we don't even realize it until we've already scheduled both of them. We're going to be having Kevin Rubio, who, is known in the 90s for having directed the fan film Troops. The Star Wars fan film as a parody of Cops. And with that, it's kind of interesting because, you've gone from the kind of what really brought that to national attention in the 90s. And while obviously people talk about hardware wars, with Star Wars, Troops is the one that really got the modern audience attention. And your movie is kind of like the next step of that, as far as like the 2000s. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
I read a book in 1988 when I became a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan called the Nightmare on Elm Street Companion, written by Jeffrey Cooper, who did the novelizations of the film. And in that, he wrote a prequel, like a backstory about Freddy. And that really kind of captured my imagination. I was like 12 years old, and for the next 25 years, I just waited for a prequel to be made. And I know there was talks about it. Robert Englund talked about it, wanting to do it. I think John McNaughton, who did Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, had actually written a script to do one, and it just never got made. And a few years ago, I was talking online with some other fans of Nightmare, and talking about how I always wanted to see that prequel get made, and someone suggested I write the script. And so I'll do something for fun, and that's all I wrote it for, just kind of personal thing, just no real intention of making it. But I decided the one thing I wanted to see Robert do or Freddy do was do a confession scene, an interrogation scene, because this is a villain who has a personality who speaks unlike the other ones in the slasher genre, and I was fascinated to listen to Freddy Krueger talk about his life and his crimes for half an hour. And I always I love watching actors like sit and talk, have a conversation, kind of like a play, like a two-man play kind of thing. Another inspiration was the Iceman Confessions from the 90s, the documentaries with Richard Kempinski, which I always felt, really, it was kind of a weird thing because Kempinski, this horrible person who murdered all these people, and he was kind of charming, you kind of like him, you want to hear more from him. And I kind of felt like Freddy was in that same vein. So I wrote this, I think it was about a 10-page script of a confession, and I played around with doing it. It was fun, setting up the camera with my friends and shooting it. And then last fall I did a movie called Volumes of Blood. It was a horror anthology. It's also playing at Horror Hound Weekend. And I did a segment called Encyclopedia Satanica. And the team I was working with, on that really impressed me, and I found a kinship with him, and we worked really well together. But one of the lead actors in the film, I just realized talking to him that he would make the perfect Freddy Krueger, and it was Kevin Roach. And it was really Kevin and that team and the excitement I had working with those people on that film that made me say, you know what, I need to get this made. It's been like 2 or 3 years since I'd written the script. And so it kind of just quickly happened.
So one of the big things I've always wondered in regards to fan films, like obviously as you've said online, it's a non-profit project. But one of the big things I've always wondered about is communication with the studio, their opinions on these projects as they're being made, and what do you have to go through when making something like this, especially with such a high-profile character as Freddy Krueger.
As far as I know, as long as you're not profiting from it, you can make a fan film, and that's basically what I did. I'm not selling any. Every day someone's asking me to make a DVD for sale or a poster, sell the poster. I just released the posters for free download for everybody so they can make their own posters. That wasn't made for money. It wasn't made for profit. It was just made out of love to the fans for 27 years. And it's kind of a love letter to those films. As far as I understand, it's completely legal as long as you're not using anything directly from those films. And again, you're not profiting from profiting. I assume they can check it in if they wanted to, but at least fan films get made every day. I've seen so many, from Star Wars to Batman to on and on. And there's been plenty of Nightmare on Elm Street ones. Unfortunately, mine's got some attention, and that kind of worried me. I really wanted to keep both profile. But I guess being, a known artist is kind of a little more fire than I expected.
But the good thing is at the same time, while you wanted to make it low profile, the fact that there's such excitement for a movie, for a fan film like this, is really interesting because a lot of the times, like we were talking about with Troops and other fan films, they got that notice after they'd hit the internet. And it's interesting because it's so different with this, because you've got this excitement going throughout social networks and going throughout Horror Hound for treating with a release that's very similar to that of a studio film in terms of excitement and people getting ready to watch it, the show. Has that been a little, as something with a situation like that, what's your opinion on it so far? And even with you wanting to maintain this low profile and seeing it kind of pick up on the social networks, did you expect it to pick up this much to where there was kind of this almost theatrical film level kind of excitement for the project?
I never expected it. It was kind of scary, and at the same time, but this is $1,000 movie made by fans, and automatically people were treating it like it was a big studio release. People were, throwing Michael Bay out there, like, no, Michael Bay didn't produce this. It's not an official film. It's a small, low-budget thing. I paid for it out of my pocket, and it's a cheap thing, but, it feels, it's flattering that people think otherwise and think big of it, because I guess that just speaks to the talent that I had working with me, my DP and my sound people, my composer, and the actors. They brought their A game, and maybe just the fact that I used people who really aren't. It's not just a bunch of friends that get together and make a movie. It's people who actually want to do this for a living making it. So maybe that's where I've seen some amazing fan films. Like you said, Troops was great. Dead End, Batman. Some of these things look like they're Hollywood productions, because a lot of them are made by special effects people or stunt people who have ties to the industry. but it's been really kind of overwhelming. I mean, I think the trailer had like 20,000 views in the first 24 hours or something. I was not expecting that at all. Websites were writing articles about it. It's funny, my producer, he asked me, do you want me to go up there on my channels and get interviews and get people talking about it and hype? I said, no, I don't want to, I want to be low key. I said, I don't want to fight anybody. But Fred Spencer wrote me, a couple of weeks before my trailer was done and asked if I wanted them to release it exclusively. And I said, well, why not? Why not? In many ways, the kind of hype or promotion I do for this movie, to me, is really for my crew and my cast, because they work for free. I work for free. This was all made out of passion, but they gave me their time, and I hope that they get attention because I think they're all super awesome and talented. All the attention I want for this film, I want for them because they're just, they need to be, a lot of them I think will be household names one day, and I hope that hopefully, this will get some attention for these guys.
Well, I think you'll be happy to know because I'm actually friends with Mike Perez, and if you know him, he produced the Never Sleep Again documentary along with the recent. I can't remember the name of the top of my head. Sorry, Mike. I can't remember the name of his Jason documentary that he recently produced, but I'm going to be sending him the interview, and I'm going to be sending him the trailer so he can check him out if he hasn't already.
The Camp Crystal Lake Memories documentary?
Yep, I think that was it right there.
Yeah, the Never Sleep Again thing has a tie into this because I worked on the book, did the book cover for the Never Sleep Again book, and Lito Velasco, who did the score for this movie, was the editor or co-editor on the Never Sleep Again movie and on the book. Regular producer on the film, editor on the book. It has some ties, Wellman, who did the sound engineering on my movie, is working on the Mark Pat documentary coming out, Screen Queen. So there's a lot of fanboys attached to this film.
That's the thing sorry, what's up?
That's all.
I was going to say, that's the thing I love about this community, especially, with the horror community, with film community, but especially horror community, is how, there is that camaraderie. There are people who want to work together and help get those projects done. And I think with projects like this, with Never Sleep Again, it's really showing studios how strong the following for these movies really are. And while sometimes it seems like the studios don't necessarily know what to do with it, it's good to know that it's grabbing attention and that the fans and what they love is being noticed.
Yeah. Of course, the movie's being met with a lot of protest. A lot of people, why is this way? This movie's really strictly based off of what's great for the original film. And so it's not going to meet everybody's idea of what Freddy Krueger is or who he is. I just wanted to take it back, but it's, I was talking with Lito last night, who again has worked on the documentary, definitely knows Nightmare backwards and forwards. And, he said, we took it back to the old school. We took it back to what made the movie work. And that's what a lot of people are recognizing in the trailer, is that, it's kind of getting that feel of what we saw in 1984. And that's kind of what I set out to do. But I'm hoping that the fans who come to this realize that that's what we were trying to do. We're not trying to capture Night Country as a whole, but as kind of a prequel to what Wes Craven released in 1984. It's just a little bit of stuff from the other movies. But yeah, a lot of Lito and Roman, they came to work on this project, work with me because we worked together on other things with the Never Sleep Again book, and Roman had done the sound for my Encyclopedia Britannica movie, but they're also big Nightmare on Elm Street fans, so they wrote me emails before I even asked, said, hey, I'll work on your Nightmare on Elm Street film. So, yeah, I'm very, very fortunate because these guys do this stuff professionally, and they offer their time and talents to make this movie as good as it is. I'm really proud of it. And I'm excited to show it to the fans.
You know, something that I think is really interesting, I was actually watching, I don't know if you've ever heard of the website, thecinemasnob.com, but the reviewer, he basically plays a role of Roger Ebert from the 1980s. Except the whole idea is that this critic, everyone else is reviewing the classy art films that he wants to review. So he gets stuck with like exploitation films and like B and Z level porn. Except every once in a while he'll get he'll review a higher profile movie. Like last year he reviewed Nightmare on Elm Street for the anniversary, and this year he reviewed Part 2. And the thing that he brought up, and I've always brought up too in the movie's defense, is that everyone talks about how, oh, Freddy's so silly, Freddy's so campy in the sequels, Part 2 is awful. But if you actually go back and watch Part 2 and look at Freddy, he's actually really, really similar to how he's portrayed in the first movie. They didn't really bring in the jokes and that kind of thing really until, ironically enough, Wes Craven came back for Part 3. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that, especially with the fact that people tend to forget that it was the Dark Freddy in Part 2 that we saw in Part 1 as well.
Yeah, fans tend to really gravitate towards the Dream Warriors era of Freddy, and when they think, and I did for a long, long, long time as well, because I think that's when he hit his stride and his popularity with Dream Warriors and Dream Master. But then even when people see, and that's where all the merchandising came, that's when the television series came. I think most fans think of that era of Freddy, and that's who Freddy is, and they kind of forget. I mean, you got fans out there who think he always had stripes on his sleeves, and they don't, like, the first movie they don't remember, or they don't compute with them. The look of him in the original, the way he acted is very different from the later films. And Nightmare 2, people say that one doesn't fit or doesn't fit the continuity. And a lot of it has to do with the absence of Nancy and their storyline, because they brought Nancy back in Dream Warrior. A lot of people think that they broke the rules. But I've always felt that Part 2 was the closest to what Wes Craven did as far as tone and atmosphere. They had the same cinematographer, same house. Everything kind of feels normal, and Freddy's still dark and sinister. And I think that's, people think of Freddy, they think of the jokester, and he always had fun, he always had humor. But and you brought up Wes Craven writing, Dream Master or Dream Warriors. His original script really wasn't really used. Ted Russell and Frank Darabont kind of reworked it, rewrote it. Wes Craven's script for Dream Warriors is very, very dark, like darker than any of them. Freddy was just totally disgusting and vile. I mean, he calls people horrible names. He said some really pervy, invasive things to people, both male and female. I don't know if anyone's ever read that script, or I know some people have, but the script that Wes Craven turned in for Dream Warriors is very X-rated in some ways.
I need to check this out.
And, yeah, it's totally different from what ended up on screen. Except Russell realized that it was too dark and it needed to be that Freddy was the hero, he was the star. But I think Wes was trying to, Wes said that he never intended Freddy to be that anti-hero, that he wanted people to be the most horrible person on earth, not somebody that children worshipped. And he kind of had some problems with that later on, and that kind of addressed his new nightmare. Seeing where all the kids are chanting Freddy, Freddy at the talk show, kind of felt some guilt over how this character that he created had become this icon that was loved by children. This Freddy pajamas being thrown and things. I mean, this character was not supposed to be your friend or your hero. He was supposed to be the most evil son of a bitch that ever lived. And in some ways, he was, in his Part 3 script, he was trying to remind people that Freddy wasn't their buddy. And he was like, Leon was smart to know that wasn't where they needed to go. They were going to make more money making him the hero, making him the James Bond character. I think that's what, and I don't know if Friday the 13th Part 6 has some influence on that because it had come out before Dream Warriors. And Jason had become kind of a Bond, anti-hero, and I think David Mark imitated the James Bond entrance in Part 6. So they realized that they were making him the franchise and become the hero. It was a good move on New Line, really. But it also killed, there were fans who were divided. There were still fans who expected and wanted the Dark Freddy. A lot of fans, fell off after Dream Master and Dream Child. So that's not the Freddy that I signed on for. But then, slashers were kind of going downhill at that point anyway.
The thing that I think, a couple of things I think that's interesting about what you said was that with Friday the 13th, the movie almost felt like a satire of what movies like this could become if you took it to a ridiculous extreme. And in many ways, I don't think that New Line saw it that way. Like you were saying, I think they saw it as like, oh, this is how the character should be. This is how the character's going to make a profit. When I think they kind of misread that in many ways, and Bob Shea ended up turning Freddy into the humorous character. The other thing that's really interesting was that I've got this little row of like horror figures on my shelf above where I record, and I pulled down Freddy because I had the 30th anniversary figure. I pulled it down while you were talking, and I looked at the sleeves, and you're right. The even with the figure, they made sure not to put the green stripes on the sleeves because it's based off the one for the first movie.
First movie, like that's what I tried to, and like my movie, Freddy's dressed like calling Fred. We don't call him Freddy, and because he was referred to as Fred Krueger a lot in the original film. But I dressed him like Part 1. He has a Part 1 glove, he has a Part 1 sweater, he has a Part 1 hat, replica. He's Part 1 Freddy, and that was something I wanted to really drive home, was that's what this movie sticks to. A lot of the mythology and a lot of the stuff that happens in it pulled from what Wes Craven had either put on film or stuff that he had actually left out. There were deleted scenes where he had lots and bits of information that were left out. And some of it was based on things that Robert had talked about, his motivation with playing Freddy originally, and Wes Craven's motivation of where the character was created, how he was invented, how he saw him. People are always questioning, how is Freddy supposed to be? That's not Freddy. Freddy changed from the film to film. Robert was let loose a lot more. Filmmakers made different decisions. A lot of it was out of creativity. A lot of it was out of boredom. I know, you don't want to keep making the same thing over and over. Robert, being the hand that he is, the real Robert Englund is the latter day Freddy. He would have been that same, comic guy if Wes not reeled him back or, edited that out. But I'm sure it was just like the further they went, the more they let Robert roll, and the more they went with it. When you see Robert Englund go into Freddy mode nowadays, he's going into the, Freddy's dead Freddy, when he imitates Freddy now.
Yeah.
Because that became the, I think that's more Robert than the original was. But there's nothing wrong with it. People like what they came into. I came into Freddy in 1988 when we only had the first 4 movies. My impression of Freddy for years was that those first 4 Freddys, they're a little different, but they're all kind of relative. That's the fun thing about Freddy is that he did evolve, he did change. And, you can choose which one you like, which one you don't. I found out when we did that Never Speak Again book, on based on the first movie. There's a lot of Freddy fans who just aren't really big on the first movie. They want to see the Dream Warrior, the Dream Master, Freddy. That's the Freddy. I think a lot of people caught on to Freddy at that point because that's when he hit his stride. Dream Warriors was such a big hit. Dream Master was the biggest grossing movie of the series at that point. They had the TV series, merchandise was everywhere, all toys and everything. So I think that later Freddy turning into TV and snakes and things was more of how people projected Freddy from then on. And first Freddy was kind of forgotten.
And I think in many ways, it's and I'm not going to fault the fan base, but I think in many ways, because of the fact that most of the fan base caught on to Freddy in the later movies, that the remake seems to get harped on a lot. When, in my opinion, I don't know about you, but I really don't think the remake is that bad. And, and if you told people today, hey, we're going to be getting a Freddy Krueger movie with Rooney Mara and Jackie Earle Haley, I don't think you would have gotten anywhere near the negative reaction that you would now. That you would when the movie came out.
That movie, I was really excited about it. A lot of people can't let Robert go. And I feel bad for Robert. That made him up here. Are you going to do another Freddy movie every day of his life? Now with the announcement of the new movie, he's probably hearing it constantly. And the man has said many times that he just not up to it anymore. He's 68 years old. He's kind of hung his glove up. He's got, here's another thing. He did that thing for 20 years. And, you got to respect that he's not interested or just not up to it. And me personally, I kind of said goodbye to Robert in 1991 when they made Freddy Dead, so they kind of promoted it at the end. And I always saw your Nightmare and Freddy vs. Jason as like as a treat, as a bonus. Like, Robert's back, awesome. But I never expected them to continue to do it over and over and over. So, at first when they announced the remake, I thought, it's just so hard to replace a guy who's played the role 8 or 9 times over a 20-year span. But, like Dracula and Wolfman and the Monster, Freddy Krueger's going to live on forever, and we got to get used to that. There's going to be other Freddy.
Yeah.
And I thought that Jackie Earle Haley was the perfect choice to play him, and I think he did a hell of a job. It was a very original, unique, and he wasn't playing Robert, he was playing another Freddy. He had a little more aggression in him, he had a little more anger in him. Not that was better than I said, Robert will still always be my Freddy, because that's who I come from.
Yeah.
I'm open to somebody else doing it. And I don't want somebody carbon copy what Robert did. I don't want to mimic. I want to see somebody take it and do it their way. Because no actor should be asked to just trace over somebody else's performance.
What I would love to see. Sorry. I was going to say what I would love to see is if they're going to cast somebody as Freddy, don't go for a character actor. Don't go for, the horror type, as they would call it. Do something like what they did in Sin City, where they cast Elijah Wood as Kevin. And he was terrifying because he was not what anyone expected.
Yeah, I mean, my choice, if I had to pick a star, I would pick Tim Roth to play Freddy. I think Tim Roth would be amazing, or Ben Foster. Somebody else I thought was really cool, but I really, truly think that they should cast an unknown, and they should try to keep him a secret, so nobody's griping about who this guy is. Oh, he doesn't look like Freddy, he doesn't look like Robert, he doesn't, they can complain about his past work. No matter who plays it, it's a thankless job. People are going to hate him. And unfortunately, Jackie had to suffer through that. The remake, it's not a great movie, but it's not as bad as people treat it. And a lot of the criticism is that it's not like the original film. There's a lot of bad choices in this part, but that's because people compare it. And if you don't compare it, you can enjoy a little more. But if you're comparing Rooney Mara to Heather Langenkamp, characters aren't the same. They're not written the same. Heather's Nancy was an all-American, innocent girl next door type who was a little strong-willed, and Rooney Mara's Heather, or Nancy, was written as a damaged goods. She was a victim of child molestation. She was introverted. She had been a victim as a child, and it affected who she was as a teenager. So she was much more closed off and more private and a little, it's just totally different. That's what really the problem with the movie was that it was too dark. It was too serious. It lost the humor or the fun or tongue-in-cheek that the original series had. Even when it was darker, it was still a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
Whereas this movie is very heavy remake. And it's not particularly bad, it's just a completely different tone than what I think audiences were wanting or expecting when they went to see it. I'm sure there's a whole generation who like it.
I think it's an enjoyable movie, and I would honestly rank it above a good chunk of the Freddy films, because for me, I enjoy, like, if I were to rank the Freddy movies I really liked and then kind of stop there, it would probably be 1, New Nightmare, 3, and Freddy's Revenge. And I think after that, I'm really, like, I'll watch the other Freddy movies, but they don't entertain me in the same way. And I'd probably put the new movie either, honestly, right below or right above Freddy's Revenge. Because, huh?
It's not a bad movie. Like people say they like it. I don't know. I think it was fun. I think maybe modern audience is different. Like the audience that I come from, they were just horror was a lot more fun in the '80s, and I think something I noticed from Flying Blood movie that I made this Encyclopedia Cat Flying Blood anthology. We've had like over 50 reviews, and all of the reviews have been very, very happy, positive. We've all loved it, which was totally unexpected. The movie's kind of a fun throwback to old, fun, self-scripted type, where we're not taking ourselves seriously, and there's a lot of comedy in there as well. And I didn't know if that was going to sell, but I've seen a lot of the critics and reviewers say that horror got so serious and dark in the 2000s, which it did. After 9/11, you get the torture porn, you get everything. And a lot of the other anthologies that are being made today, that a lot of them just seem like people are trying to outgross or outshock the other guy. So you watch ABC The Death or VHS, it seems like they're not having fun, but they're trying to out-horror the other guy. And they're not producing fun movies to watch. They're producing these movies that are kind of dark and depressing. And where Blind Blood, it was just like, hey, we're having fun here. We're having fun with this genre that, and I think, another indication would be Wolf Creek 2. Wolf Creek 2 seemed to be a lot more popular than the first one. And I read that Greg McLean realized that the first Wolf Creek was very dark and brutal and very much of that post 9/11 reality, brutal, violent stuff. And he realized that audiences were looking for something else now. So he brought humor. And if you watch Wolf Creek 2, Nick Taylor suddenly is a very pretty Krueger type character. Now he's laughing, he's joking, he's having much more fun, everything's going more over the top. And I noticed a lot more people had more fun with the sequel than they did the original.
See?
I think maybe if they do make the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, they need to realize that they need to bring that humor back. Not one-liner jokes Freddy. It's just not so heavy. Let people have fun at the movies. Think about Scream. Think about these movies that are a fun time in the theater. Don't make you walk out, man, I need a bath. I just feel disgusted.
I think two movies that struck, even though they're very different, I think two movies that struck kind of a good balance of that were Trick or Treat was one. Because Trick or Treat's a perfect example how to have that kind of dark gruesomeness without going too far and actually have fun with it. Because that movie is hilarious. Like, it's a really funny horror film.
Trick or Treat's a perfect example where horror needs what they need to be doing now.
Now,
that movie, I very rarely run into anybody because it was so fun. You cannot not watch that and not enjoy your time. And again, like you said, it wasn't a satire. It wasn't like watching Shaun of the Dead, although I love Shaun of the Dead. It's not a horror comedy. It's got humor. It's not having fun, but it's also still very creepy and violent when it needs to be.
Now the one I know of is really polarizing. I personally like it, and I wanted to get your opinion on it too, because it's kind of a tribute to a different era for horror films. Because we've been talking about a lot of the horror movies made in the '80s, but House of the Devil was a completely different animal because it was more of a tribute to horror movies from the '70s, and it seemed like it fell into the trap of the modern horror audience trying to view it in today's standards. And based off the quote-unquote serious horror films of that time period in the early to mid-2000s. What do you think of the movie? Because I think it's a movie that hasn't really got its fair shake from, like, the modern horror generation.
House of the Devil was really good. It was, I like to watch something like that, and Conjuring, and maybe It Follows, into this whole thing where those three films kind of remind me of the 70s and 80s type of stuff that they were making then. But everybody's saying it's trying to emulate the 80s. They're all like, hey, we grew up on the 80s, so we're going to make 80s style horror. But one of the things I've noticed is that people, when they try to emulate the 80s horror now, they emulate the bad. They try to say, well, this is, like, we're going to use crappy acting and mistakes and cheese, try to capture that 80s feel, instead of saying, well, we're going to capture that 80s atmosphere or that 70s atmosphere by making really good cinema, instead of saying, it's, Hobo with Shotgun is a fun movie. It's a great movie, and I hate to even bring this up as a example, but maybe this is the best example I can think of. Is that movie? It uses all of the exploitation, cheap cinema cliches and things to get across that, hey, this is a throwback 80s Grindhouse or something like Planet Terror. And I'm not saying those movies are bad at all. I'm just using them as an example of a lot of the filmmakers who are making horror and trying to make them 80s style are using what made 80s films kind of bad movies. Whereas It Follows, House of the Devil, they're using the atmosphere that those films created, but they're actually making very intelligent, beautifully crafted films. I should say that. It sounds like I'm insulting Hobo with Shotgun. I'm not. I love that movie.
Yeah.
But maybe you get the idea of what I mean. It's like, well, don't make fun of my movie. It's got bad acting intentionally. I did that intentionally. Did that ironically. And they may have intentionally made the actors act like they're in a Friday the 13th movie, capture that feel. But, something like It Follows or House of the Devil remind me of those films that I watched growing up, and they take me back there immediately, more so than saying, hey, look, we're making a real crappy 80s slasher throwback. They take me back immediately. When I watched It Follows, it felt like I was there back in my childhood in the 80s, even though it's not really set in the 80s. But the choices that the director made as far as setting, art direction, mood, music, the way the characters are realistic kids and not. Now that's another thing you get with modern horror, especially with the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Kids all seem like rich, kids who live in, Beverly Hills. They don't feel like middle America, everyday kids like kids in the original Nightmare on Elm Street film. And that was something I liked about It Follows. It felt like real kids in a real world, a real place.
I think
they had a real relationship.
I mean, another movie. While it's not necessarily a horror film, it is a pretty dark movie, and it's more a crime film than anything. I think a movie that did this also really well was Drive, Because you watch Drive and it reminds you of all the best things about Michael Mann, about movies like Vice Squad, and it doesn't, and stylistically it feels like that kind of dark crime movie with a lot of the kind of harsh lighting, a lot of the neon lighting that you get from movies like that back in the day, but it was never making fun. And that's a perfect example of, even though it's not a horror genre, even though it's a different genre, it reminded me of something that I would have seen on To Live or Die in L.A.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like Michael Mann, but it feels like that William Friedkin movie. It feels, Nicholas is an awesome director anyway. I love his films, even before Drive made him a big success. And Drive is probably I hate to say it because it's an old monster, but it is my favorite of his films. I love Bond as well, and the Pusher films. But Drive was just so fighting, and it was so, I don't know, it caught me off guard, and just love the atmosphere, I love the visuals, I love the music, I love, it's really caught on. Drive has influenced so many movies in the last 5 years since it came out, because everybody's using the John Carpenter synth, dance music, or techno music stuff now. Everyone is, take a movie like Nightcrawler, which I adored, definitely had some Drive influence in it. Just shooting people driving around at night in LA with neon lights and everything. I think, Maniac, the remake of Maniac, definitely influenced by Drive. And I love that. And it's kind of hard not to fall into that. Like when we made Volume of Blood, one of the segments that my friend Jacob directed, he definitely pulled from Maniac to Drive all it. The way he lit it, the way the music is very, and I kind of envious because I want to play in that world. I want to play in that Michael Mann or John Carpenter stuff kind of thing. And, but I also don't want to just be another, I'll just take it from Nicholas. But there's a lot of great films being made out of horror and within horror. I see so many great movies every year that I can't even compile how many fun to beat them down. I think Tarantino just said that recently in an article that people say that more of a movie stink, but it's always hard to pick the top 10 anymore because you actually are seeing a lot of great films. Just people focus on the negative. They don't think a remake or a reboot or a sequel. It's not true. And that's all you do is follow what the mainstream's feeding you. But if you're in horror, you're just going to watch all these haunted house movies that they keep shoving down our throats, these remakes. And you're missing out on a lot of great stuff.
Exactly. I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's actually one I want to check out. It's about these. It's on Netflix. It's about an audio editor, and the whole movie plays with sound. And apparently, the better your sound system is, the more you'll benefit with the movie. I'm trying to figure out what the movie is right now. Huh?
The Toby Jones one?
Maybe.
Barbarian Sound something?
Yes, Bavarian Sound Studio. I think is what it's called.
I haven't seen it yet.
I've been wanting to watch that. I'm probably going to watch it tonight because I've just heard so many good things about it. And I know if you ever go to the YouTube channel Good Bad Flicks, he actually said that was probably one of the best horror films he's seen in the last few years. So that makes me really excited right there because dude knows, like with you and like with a couple of the other people we've had on our show, dude knows his stuff. So I'm definitely interested in checking that out.
Yeah, it looks really good. I mean, it looks like the movie that probably alienates a lot of people. It looks kind of a artsy, slow film, which is usually a death knell for 50% of your audience out there, if not more. I always, when I see really good movies that are patient, they take their time, and they're, again, like the 70s, where it's all about character and atmosphere. Like, so many people are going to call this boring and crap, and they're not really paying attention to the craftsmanship and the intelligence behind the film instead of, everybody wants to be hit every 10 minutes with a kill scene or something. I appreciate a movie that takes its time and is more interested in story and character.
It's funny. It's what I call the Ty West curse, where you put a lot of work into a movie, but because it's a little bit subtle, according to the mainstream audience, it's crap. And I've been calling it the Ty West curse over the last couple of years.
Ty West is a really good filmmaker.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Everybody attacks anybody who's a hit. Like, I don't know any director right now working that people don't crap on. Ty West gets crapped on. Eli Roth gets crapped on. Adam Green. All these guys, and I don't get it. Why is everyone's so against these guys? I mean, I like House of the Devil, of course. It's the best film. The Innkeepers was very, very interesting, very entertaining. I remember it kind of lost me. Like, I remember loving the first half and then kind of lost me on the second half until I realized that what he was really doing was kind of going back to those old style haunt movies, like Haunting and even the William Castle stuff. I realized that's kind of where he was going with it, and I realized, he kind of nailed that. And then I like The Sacrament a lot. It was pretty good.
I still need to watch The Sacrament. I've not gotten a chance to watch it yet.
I checked it out. I mean, I've always been kind of fascinated by the Jim Jones thing anyway. So I wanted to see his take on it. And I dug it. I know a lot of people criticized it. But, I mean, it's a scary story. I mean, Jim Jones, you're never going to top, like, the Powers Booth movie. Of course, Powers Booth is amazing. Not Bartek had to do anything, but I think it's a story that a lot of people actually don't know. There's still a lot of people who don't know about Jonestown.
And it's... sorry.
Everything.
Well, I was going to say, and it's amazing because of how terrifying. And the weird thing is you hear people say, drink the Kool-Aid, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think they get what they're referencing when they say that.
Yeah.
Like, it's so strange that something so terrifying came out of real life. You look at, you look at the real world. It's kind of sad. You look at the real world, and there's so many horrifying things that have happened in the real world. There are a lot of good things too, but there's so much horror that's happened in the real world that, in many ways, it seems like you have a lot of horror directors who can't really top it. So, because it's so disturbing that they end up taking so much from it, and a lot of people don't realize that. Perfect example is, while they're both very loose takes on it, Ed Gein and how many horror films he's influenced.
Yeah, Ed Gein is kind of an obsession of mine. I really kind of want to make it deeper. I didn't know this kid. What shocked me about Ed Gein is I didn't know who he was when I was in college. When I got in college, I was working at a grocery store, and there was a book by Harold Schechter called Outcry. And Harold had written a lot of true crime books. I had never read any of them. He was kind of an authority on Ed Gein, and he had written a book about Ed Gein, but this was like a fiction book about what if Ed Gein had a son. And in the very first chapter, the book is about a writer who decides to write a book on Ed Gein. The first chapter is like his first chapter from his novel about Gein. And I'm reading this, and I'm reading about, Bernice Ward being shot, hung up, cut open, and her head chopped off, and dressed out like a deer, and all the stuff they found in the house, clothes made of skulls, and, all that stuff. And I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is amazing, this is crazy. And then I found out it's real, that this guy really existed. And, how can I not know who Ed Gein is? And then, finding out that he was an inspiration for Norman Bates and Leatherface and Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. And then I discovered that they made Deranged, the 1974 film. Of course, then several years later, they made this Steve Railsback movie. The thing about Gein that always fascinated me, though, was that you read about him, wasn't evil. It was like he was more like he didn't know any better. he was just so messed up in the head that he would do all this stuff because he would read these men's magazines about headhunters and cannibals, and he just kind of he had no. After his mother died, he had no supervision. He was kind of a man child in some ways. And it's almost like he was a big kid who was just kind of experimenting. And it's this really creepy thing. And what I loved about Clark Barker had written a book into the series about horror, and Ed Gein was the first topic, and he talked about how Ed Gein was what Americanized horror. Ed Gein was arrested in 1958. Before that, horror was all about Europe, Transylvania, castles and manors. When Ed Gein was captured in 1958, in the middle of the heart of America during the Great 50s, people started questioning who their neighbor was and locking their doors at night, and it changed how people lived and thought about their neighbors, and it brought horror into America, brought it into our backyard, and you had Psycho, and you had John Carpenter bringing horror right to our backyards, and Haddonfield, Middle America, Illinois, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Going back to Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes naming that movie Elm Street. Elm Street is just a symbol of America, Middle America, suburbia. It really isn't like a physical place to him. It was just, what's more American than Elm Street? Might as well be Apple Pie Street. Basically, what he was doing. So I like the idea that Ed Gein was kind of the person who ushered in modern horror and Americanized horror, where horror was no longer the Wolfman horrors or Dracula in his castle, but now horror was, Charles Whitman climbing the tower and shooting people in Texas, and Ted Bundy and Zodiac Killer. And that's really when, after Ed Gein, it just opened the floodgates on that stuff. Because in the 70s, you had Speck and Gein and Bundy and Gacy and Charles Manson, of course, in '69, and all that influenced horror. Horror changed after that. I think, Peter Bogdanovich made an awesome movie a lot of people haven't seen called Targets. He really talks about that because Bogdanovich was hired by Corman to direct a Boris Karloff movie. They had Boris, or they had Boris, and they wanted Bogdanovich to write a horror movie with Boris Karloff. And he said, I don't find Boris Karloff's horror scary. So he wrote this movie about this young man who goes up on the highway, starts shooting people driving by on the highway. The sniper just snaps and kills people. And basically, he was saying that Boris Karloff is not Pierce anymore. It's Charles Whitman. It's Charlie Starkweather. Guys like this that are real monsters living among us. And I think it's kind of interesting because I was talking about this the other day online about the old classic Universal monsters, and they keep remaking them. I think they're remaking Dracula and Frankenstein again. It's really hard to make them work now because that brand of horror doesn't scare people anymore because the world itself is so scary now with serial killers and terrorists. So you get half the people who say, I want to go to the movie to escape reality, and then you have people who reflect reality. And I don't know if the old monster movies work anymore because of that. Some of the guys are getting being so exposed. I'm sure there were Ed Geins before Ed Gein. And there's Albert Fish, there was Sonny Bean, there was Jack the Ripper, Chase Holmes, which Mark Scorsese is making a movie about him now. So I'm sure there were maniacs and axe murderers and serial killers all way back.
The thing that I think is interesting in bringing this back, and like you were saying, bringing this back to Freddy Krueger before you wrap the show, it seems like with Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven kind of found the perfect compromise. The idea of the real life horror of a child killer retconned later into a child molester, child killer. But also having the idea of him going into your dreams and having these surrealistic sequences that are straight out of with a mixture of modern art, like someone like Salvador Dali, and classic horror, like the classic out of this world horror. And it seemed like Freddy Krueger was very much that. He was both sides of the coin brought into the same side.
Yeah, Freddy's a brilliant character all around. I mean, again, you get the real monster, which is what my film's about. I tried to really handle him as a realistic human being, as a flesh and blood mortal man, as opposed to the supernatural. Like I always find new things with the original film. And one of the things I noticed a while back in that original film, Freddy, you almost parallel it to say Spider-Man, like the superhero movie. Like the first time we see, second time we see Freddy on the film, in that alleyway where his arms are stretching across the alleyway, and he's chasing her around, he's teleporting, he's jumping around, he cuts off the stairs and laughs about it, she rips his face off. He's doing all this very superhero stuff, like this immortal, I can do anything, and he's done it with such glee, and it's almost like he's like, hey, check out what I can do, look what I can do. Like, when he mutilates himself, he's like saying, hey, baby, you can't hurt me. You can't tell me I'm immortal. I'm unstoppable. I'm Superman. And I can stretch my arm. You can't get away. I can teleport. You can't get away from me. And I was like, in that first movie, it's almost like he's like a superhero discovery powers for the first time. He's enjoying it. And he's really enjoying his immortality. So I always felt like in life, Freddy was not powerful. He was, and now he's really enjoying being powerful. And the only thing that brought him power in his life was victimizing children. Because he had power over them because they were afraid of him. Nobody else was afraid of him. Everybody was, he's just a piece of trash. And so it's a great character. It's like I said, he's a child murderer. He's not a nice guy. He's a horrible person. It's not like Jason, who was his victim, his kid who was sympathized with and who died. And it's just a confused man-child or whatever. Michael, there's no rhyme or reason how he's just evil personified, evil motorized. In Leatherface to me is a victim. When you watch the original film, Leatherface is kind of treated like the family dog. He's afraid of his cook. He's afraid of the hitchhiker. They call him names. They feed him. I always kind of saw him as the family dog. He's somebody to beat up. He kills everybody in the first movie more out of fear and protection than menace. I think that's where the remake kind of got it wrong, was that Leatherface never felt vicious in the original film. After he kills the second guy, he goes panicking through the house, looks out the window, all paranoid and afraid that maybe this family secret's going to get revealed. And where are all these people coming from? I mean, they invade his home. He doesn't hunt them. So that's what really made Leatherface interesting to me as well. I think Leatherface's second was interesting because of that. He wasn't a vicious. I don't think he was a vicious, but I think he was natural. It was what he'd been taught or raised. But he's also, I think he's a victim. I think that's how Gunnar played him.
Exactly. It's like I showed my friends the two movies because we recently went out to the house. It had the one that had been turned into a restaurant. We went and ate there. We took a bunch of pictures. I can't remember. I think I showed them on your page. And then we afterwards, they had never actually seen the first two movies, so they got to go to the house first before they actually got to watch the movies. And that night we watched both of them because let's be honest, third and fourth movie I really could care less about. But except for Ken Foree and Viggo Mortensen. But beyond that, I really don't care about the third and fourth movie at all. But showing those to them, they were really, really shocked because they said, we liked both movies, but we liked them for completely different reasons. And the part that really, really disturbed them was when Franklin died in the first movie, because he's probably the most logical character in the movie. It's like, let's not go out to the house. Let's stay here. Let's wait. Let's maybe try to get away. And you almost feel bad for him because he probably gets it the worst when he was the one person who actually had any kind of real sense. Besides the main girl.
Yeah, I mean, him and Sally both were kind of sensible characters.
Yep.
The others were like, I mean, again, they go in somebody else's house, they invade his house. They feel their own fate. Of course, a different time, but Leatherface wasn't out looking for trouble. Trouble came to his front door, came to his house.
Exactly.
And Franklin was, annoying, of course, but you feel bad for him because everybody, he's real mean to him, but he's also, he's just because he's annoying, but, he's also handicapped and he needs help. I mean, and I'm sure depression and being, being and not one of the crowd, kind of being the fifth wheel to his sister, not friends, Yeah, I mean, I didn't want Franklin to die. I didn't want anybody to die, but, I can see for somebody to sympathize with Franklin very easily.
Yeah, which is interesting because you talk about the character being annoying, but my friends are actually younger. They're about 20 and 21, and it's interesting showing them some of these older horror films from my generation and seeing how they react, because they're in my opinion, they're pretty unique amongst people their age, because they really enjoyed, like, I showed my friend Adam Phantasm, and he watched it, and he did not say a word during the entire movie. He just transfixed on the movie, and only thing he says right after the end, well, I'm not going to sleep tonight. And I just thought that was great.
It's really cool that there are some people who are really able to connect with these movies, because we get a lot of people who they're so used to seeing what they get now. And it's just a funny generation thing. A lot of people in my generation just get so hateful and angry that movies are so different, and they think that everything that we grew up on is perfect and great. And, I get the kids who don't get it, because, a lot of these movies, you take Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's 40 years old now. And if I was a teenager in the 90s, early 90s, that would be like me watching a movie that was made in the 30s, 40s.
Yeah, probably like 1950s.
It's like, I could watch those movies and I'm not going to relate to them. I'm not going to find them scary because they're so dated, they're so different. Like Texas Chainsaw has been emulated and ripped off so many times that you've seen all these other movies, Wrong Turn, and you see Texas Chainsaw, it just can't have the same effect it had on audiences in the 1970s and 80s. When I saw Texas Chainsaw, I'd never seen anything like it before. It scared the shit out of me. And it felt real. But I can imagine if you've seen the remake and you've seen all these other brutal, violent movies and hostile movies, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre does feel kind of tame to you. And that's kind of a sad thing to think that movie doesn't have the same effect on somebody. So I love it when I do see a younger audience that really appreciates those films. I always say that, some movies, I watch horror movies all the time, and that scares me now, but I always know when something's doing it right, the numbers, and so, I can go back and watch a horror film that doesn't really necessarily scare me, but appreciate how good it is. And something like The Haunting in 1963 doesn't really scare me, but it's so wonderfully directed and crafted, the cinematography, everything about it is so perfect. And at that time, it was so ahead of its time. It was so well done.
So
I love that there are people who can watch older films and recognize why they're classics, why people still love them. They don't necessarily get scared by them or think they're cheesy or corny.
we before we wrap up the show, I just wanted to say that what we had done, like he had actually seen Phantasm before, but his girlfriend hadn't, and he really thought that she'd like it too. And he had never seen the Twilight Zone movie, and she had. So, and she really loved that movie, and she thought he'd like it. So I invited some friends over, and we did kind of a old school horror night. We kind of mixed it up. We showed Suspiria, Phantasm, and the Twilight Zone movie. And I gave a little bit of history, because, like you, I'm a huge movie geek, for each movie before we showed it. And the funny thing is, apparently, I forget that my friend Natalie actually does special effects makeup. And in fact, she's going to be doing Freddy makeup for me for the zombie walk. She's going to do like the full Freddy head and face latex makeup for me. And she said, that she makes all these movies with her friends, and that the way they did the lighting in Suspiria reminded her so much of it that now she wants to watch more Argento movies so she can see that style even more. And she also got scared shitless by Phantasm.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from these movies. It really does take an artist or someone who stops and recognizes the artistry. Like, I always bring up, I trained to be a comic book artist for about 20 years. And when I got into comic books, I was 13. And I remember, when I was 13, 14, 15, I was looking at comic books. And that was a time when guys like Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, and Sam Keith, these guys were really top dogs, top artists. And they were all about Flash, Flash pages, dynamic drawings. It was much more about Flash than craft. And I remember at that young age not really knowing the craft, not knowing anything about making comics, that I would look at some of the other artists who weren't as flashy and weren't as showy. And I would look at their art and I'm like, well, how did they get a job? How did they get, to work on this comic book? Their art's boring. Not very dated. It's not very exciting. And then after I would, learn comics for about 10, 15 years, I would learn that there's so much craft, thought, skills, and tricks and manipulation and how to tell stories visually and how to, you learn that comic books is 90% storytelling, not about how pretty your pictures are. And you learn the craft, you learn the real intelligence behind it, and then you realize, oh, that's why those guys got work, because they were master craftsmen. And so that's something I think you really, like when you really become especially like a filmmaker. Ever since I become, I grew up loving movies, sword movies, and I would recognize stuff. But now that I've gotten into filmmaking and I've worked on films, I've talked to other filmmakers, I've studied it. It's just like comics. It has a craft. There's so much going on that the audience has no idea what's going on. There's so much stuff that the filmmakers are doing that nobody is paying attention to. I just watched Dream Child the other day, talking about Nightmare. I never really liked Dream Child. I thought it was Freddy was too goofy, and that's all I paid attention to. Freddy's being really goofy, and the story's kind of all that. But I was watching it the other day and noticing what a genius director Stephen Hopkins is. I always liked Stephen Hopkins stuff like Judgment Night, Ghost in the Dark. But I was watching, his art direction, his camera movements, his shots, his cinematography choices, framing, all this stuff. And that movie has some amazing directing going on in it. That if you're only paying attention to, this is silly and cheesy, you're not paying attention to it. And so while watching, I had this new respect for that movie, totally from a director's standpoint, of some of the things that Stephen Hopkins did that were very smart and creative. And, maybe the movie didn't work as a whole, but she showed a lot of great talent. Rennie Harlan was the same thing. Some people don't like Dream Master, but Rennie Harlan was a great visual, smart, very creative director. So you start to appreciate these movies, whether they're great or not. I never loved the Friday the 13th movies, but I watched Friday the 13th Part 4. That stuff was very, very well directed, crafted, and those are the things that you don't realize until you start doing it, and or you really study film. If you've gone to film school, if you're studying, if you've read or whatever. So it's interesting to get the opinion of the man on the street versus the person who is really invested in learning the inner workings of something. Hey, I like that car. It looks really cool. Yeah, but do you know how it works? Do you know how to put it together, take it apart? What went into it? So that's the fun part of filmmaking, I think, now is that in art has always been that way too. It's learning the inner workings of the craft, how to manipulate audiences and make people go with you on your journey in every single way that you possibly can make them.
And with that, as we bring our show to a close, where can people find the movie? Because I know you've said that it's going to premiere at Horror Hound, and one more. And what was the date? What was the date and location one more time?
Horror Hound weekend is in Indianapolis, Indiana, September 11th through the 13th at the Marriott East. They have a huge Nightmare on Elm Street reunion. Robert Englund's going to be there, Heather Langenkamp, 20 other Nightmare on Elm Street guests, along with Lance Henriksen and a few other big names. It's going to be a great, great show.
And where can people find you? Do you have a particular table at the convention?
My table?
Yeah.
I'm not sure where my table will be. It'll probably be in the main room, main visitor hall. Last couple of years, you've had me on end cap. As far as the movie, I'll be at the screening. Especially Fred Krueger's playing Friday and Saturday at 10. After the show is closed. So if you're at the show and you get out of the show and you have nowhere to go, you can watch the movie. Lions of Blood is supposed to follow on Friday night after Confession. And then Confession is getting an encore screening on Saturday night. And then on Monday, September 14th, at 14:28, so 2:28 Eastern Time, I'm putting the movie officially on YouTube for free for everybody to see. So the movie will be available for everyone on the 14th of September, Monday. I timed it at 2:28 because it's 14:28 worldwide. That 14:28 is the number of the house that Nancy lives in, the Elm Street house.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I heard it like, that's clever. I was like, well, I'm thinking of the time. I was like, what about 14:28? 28. Yeah. So, gotta go up live and hopefully it'll be up forever and people will like it. I'm sure people will hate it. I watched it for the first time last night sleep, so we just finished it today. And I got goosebumps. I'm extremely happy with it. I can't wait for people to see what Kevin Roach did as Freddy Krueger. I didn't have him mimic Robert. I have him in the same vein. Mark was written for Robert in the play, but so I wrote it in Robert's voice, and that's Freddy Krueger. But Kevin, I just kind of let him go because he's such a talented actor, and I really hope people respond to him very well because he's a phenomenal actor. He really is the driving force of the movie, in my opinion. So I hope people come out and check it out at Horror Hound for coming. Check it out on Monday, September 14th on YouTube. If you look me up on, if you look at Confession of Fred Krueger up on Facebook, there's a page, and there'll be the link will be posted there on Monday. You just follow the link and watch the movie and, you know, do some terrible comments in the comment section.
Like you do.
Call me names if you want.
It's like, in fact, I'm encouraging you to do it. And if you get really creative, you'll get a prize.
Yeah, please don't. I won't be reading it because I don't read them anymore. But okay. I made the movie I love. I love the movie. I made the one mistake. So, you know, praise and criticism doesn't really matter. It's my love letter to Wes and Robert. If they write me to tell me I'm a horrible person, then I might be hurt by it, but I think they're going to look out. They won't do that.
Awesome. And with that, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for coming on the show again. You're always, as you know, at this point, you're always welcome back. And remember, guys, if you don't check out Nathan's work, if you don't go to circuit42.com, Freddy's going to kill you. It's pretty much down to that at this point.
Hey, we're close now.
All right, and thank you again for coming on the show. You have a great night, and remember, people, keep watching movies and keep getting scared.